Wolf back. What's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Rose Street, RoseStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves. Just absolutely thrilled to welcome back for the third time now, the Ringer's Danny Kelly. You can find him at Danny B. Kelly. He's one of the Ringer's top fantasy football draft and overall NFL writers, in addition to co-hosting the Ringer Fantasy Football Show, one of my favorites, always some unique episodes and talking points. So I love turning into that one. If you haven't heard it, you guys got to listen in. Danny, thanks so much for coming on this Friday. How's everything going, man?
It's going really well. We were talking before the show. Got a little bit of Sunday scaries going on for the season. The grind is officially here. Well, it's pretty close to being here anyway. But yeah, no, it's exciting. I'm one of those like weirdos that likes watching preseason football. So it's been kind of fun getting back into it. Real football, real plays and everything. It's kind of fun watching all the rookies. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just ready for the season to get going.
Absolutely. Yeah. Once you get to this point, and for me, it's double scaries, as I was saying, because I got school starting up in just a week or so. So it is doubly scary for me. But yeah, the one golden, silver lining to it all is football's back on TV, and it is the absolute best. So I'm pumped. I'm with you. I love preseason. I love preseason DFS. I'm a pure degenerate of that nature. We'll toss in some DraftKings lineups. Why not? Always a good time. And one of the most important things, of course, that you guys are all tuned in for is it's fantasy draft season. And that's why we got to get these rankings right for you, these tiers right for you. And we'll be diving into the top 40 fantasy football wide receiver rankings. I think the Ringer, by the way, I guess should have shouted out. The way you have the rankings on the site are just so I don't know how you do it. I wish I knew, because I would love my site to look like that. It's awesome how the guide, you can click on a player, it shows their profile, the filters, especially the draft tracker sheet. Like, there is so many cool tools that you guys have over there on the Ringer. So whoever your web developer is, cheers to them. They are fantastic. But man, awesome. I love your guys' draft kit. I love your guide and the articles you have up. Is there anything specific you'd like to plug about that before we dive into these receivers?
Yeah, I mean, you alluded to it, but I think the thing that kind of sets us apart is the usability. It's actually really good on mobile too, which is kind of rare. But yeah, the one thing I think is the coolest about it, and some of my friends have told me this is really useful, is we have this, what you call the draft tracker, and you can click on the players that have gone off. So you can follow along as your draft is going on, click players that have been drafted, and then you can see really easily who our top ranked guys are, basically. And so like that will give you an idea if you like what we do. If you trust us, then it'll show exactly who is still on the board and still ranked really highly for us. It's a good way of like comparing to, like the ADP or whatever that's on, like whatever platform you're drafting on could be like vastly different than ours, and than our rankings. And so it kind of can tell you which guys we're especially high on, which guys we're especially low on. And then that helps you kind of make your decisions in the heat of the moment. So that, I think, is the most useful thing that we have on that. And I wish I could take credit for the actual like user interface, but I can't. But it is really awesome, I think. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's a great tool. I love it, as you said, it really highlights your guys' rankings. Great way to you can flag players down. It's awesome. It's a really, really awesome, unique tool out there. But as mentioned at the top, we will be talking top 40 wide receivers. I obviously cannot hit every single one of these names, but I'll just bring them in already here to start, where I'll have mine side by side with the Ringers. You can see the Ringers on the left, mine on the right there. We'll talk through the tiers, the names, see if there's any big, strong disagrees, strong agrees, all that good stuff as we go to help you guys navigate that receiver position. Before we get going, if you don't mind hitting that thumbs up button, hitting the like, the shares, retweets, wherever you're tuned in here, it does help us so much to grow. It's so greatly appreciated. And if you enjoy the show while you're tuned in, then please consider subscribing, helping us grow the channel. It would be so greatly appreciated. Of course, I'll hit all your questions in the mailbag after the show, after Danny's gone here. So by all means, get your questions in, and I will hit those at the end. Alrighty, so let's start diving into these. I do obviously want to give the preface. These are obviously the staff composite rankings. So of course, and you guys had a great episode. I very highly encourage anybody to listen to their wide receiver rankings and tiers first episode they did over at the Ringer Fantasy Football Show. There's tons of great discourse, and I know that's gonna. Well, we'll try to generate some of that here again today. But I know these aren't 100% your ranking, so there might be a few that I'll point out, and you might say, actually, I love that guy, and that's just a composite thing. So we'll definitely dive into that. I know you mentioned at the top these are about to go through an update as well, so there might be a few things that could be changing. So it's kind of a useful exercise in that sense to see who may have risen or fallen since the last update as we go. And I know we can't talk about every player in the top 40 and squeeze it in, but we will definitely make sure to highlight some of the biggest questions you guys might be asking yourselves as we look through these. So Does that seem like a good preface? Anything else you want to
Yeah.
chat
No,
about before we get in?
I think that's perfect. I mean, yeah, like I was telling you before the show, it's a little fluid. We change our rankings weekly, so
Yeah.
I think we're due for a little bit of a tier break update in terms of like who we got where. And as you said, we talked it out on our show, and show was I think about 2 weeks ago, and we all kind of disagreed on everything. This is it's like there's a lot of I think generally speaking, our rankings are where we want them to be, but there's quite a bit of disagreement on who belongs in what tier. So I think this is gonna be kind of fun to talk it out, see exactly where we agree and disagree on some of these guys. And of course, these are just guidelines. It's like if you have a guy a certain amount higher than we do, like obviously go for it and take your guy. But this is here to help you kind of gauge and plan your draft, and the tiers obviously help that a lot, because if there's multiple players in your tier still left, maybe you can wait on it for a round and still get a guy in that tier, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think it's a really fun exercise.
Yeah, tiers are so crucial. I'm so glad you guys do them. I always use tiers, as you mentioned, to help the flow of the draft. If you know there's only one running back in a tier, but 7 receivers, you can always dip your toes in that. And also auction drafting too. You want to make sure, especially we have a lot of auction listeners, and ultimately, you don't never want to be at the end of a tier, but you want to also be like right in the middle, find a sweet spot of guys going cheap that might not be the guy you were targeting at the top of that tier, but man, you get that $5 discount, even though he's right around the same ranking. So tiers are so useful in that. But one thing that we know are going to go expensive, and two guys right at the top, we'll start there, Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson. If you have a top 4 pick, there's a good chance you're going to be debating one or the other guys, certainly if Taylor and Christian McCaffrey are gone. Mm-hmm. So where do you stand on this great debate of Cooper Kupp versus Justin Jefferson? I don't think you can go wrong, but certainly you can be more right because someone's going to outscore the other. Who do you think has the better season?
Oh my gosh, this is so tough. The expression that we've been using, I think maybe Rich Rebar was one who coined this. It's like you want to skate to where the puck is going to be. And there's just this chance, it seems like Cooper Kupp, after having the Triple Crown and having the most insanely productive season from a receiver maybe ever, like incredible season, he's just going to be due for some regression. I ended up moving him down. I ended up moving Justin Jefferson ahead of him when we started getting all these Stafford reports about his elbow potentially being, a little bit more problematic and worrisome than we thought, like earlier in the offseason. Since then, I think in the last few days, I've decided to move Cooper Kupp back up. Just at the end of the day, I think both are great options. Like maybe they're going to have similar seasons. I just think Cooper Kupp, we've seen it happen. We've seen this offense really get rolling. The connection that he has with Matthew Stafford is undeniable. I think the Rams are still going to continue to be sort of a funnel passes through him and Allen Robinson and kind of just work from there. So I think Cooper Kupp has the opportunity to be the overall wide receiver 1. But of course, Justin Jefferson, younger, more, I would say more versatile and dynamic probably than Cooper Kupp, though Cooper Kupp is an amazing route runner. I just think Jefferson has the potential, as he's going to be able to move back into the slot a little bit more and kind of move around the formation, gets more, easy to exploit matchups against linebackers. Cause Cooper Kupp ran, I don't even know what it was, 20-30% of his routes are against linebackers, which is just crazy to think about. And that's how you get production, because he's just easily breaking these guys off and whatever. And so Justin Jefferson, as we saw his final year at LSU, is great from the slot too. I want to say he ran 60 or 70% of his routes outside last year. And I think this year, maybe you could see that get a little more even. He's going to probably be inside a little bit more. So that could mean more volume. You could see the Vikings potentially be a little more high pass rate and things like that. But at the end of the day, I've got Cooper Kupp with a slight edge over Justin Jefferson. Our official rankings have Jefferson slightly higher because I got outvoted. But I think at the end of the day, these are so close. It's really, splitting hairs, and both of them are guys that I'm going to be picking and not even thinking second about after picking them. If I got to pick in the top 4 or 5, I'll just pick them and not really think about it.
Exactly. I'm actually in agreement here too with Cooper Kupp at the top. I mean, 13 of his 16 games were above 20 points. 88% were crazy. Top 12 receivers. That's just insane consistency. And I really don't see why it won't be repeatable. As you mentioned, the offense really just creates these mismatches. I love Matt Harmon, what he calls layup targets. That's the definition of what Kupp gets. I guess the only devil's advocate, I mentioned, I have Cooper Kupp number 1 too. The devil's advocate is, well, now that's the same exact role we expect Justin Jefferson to be in, with Kevin O'Connell moving there.
Right.
Justin Jefferson himself has talked about how much more he's moved, how more modern this offense is. And if you had one versus the other as an actual talent, as good as Cooper Kupp is, Justin Jefferson might be the actual best receiver talent currently in the league right now.
Exactly.
Certainly after breaking the rookie receiving yardage record, then following that up with the most yards through 2 seasons. Jamar Chase might be right on his tail, and we'll talk about him in just a second. But that's kind of the good devil's advocate. And it is, like you said, splitting hairs. It's tough. And you certainly, I don't think you can go wrong. I think these guys are just going to constantly be going back and forth in the receiving yardage total and the fantasy points total. And it's going to be real close come season's end. I'm exactly like you said, I want a top 4 pick so I can get one of these 2 guys.
Yes.
Because I love them both.
Exactly. It's either going to be, CMC, Taylor, Kupp, or Jefferson. If I have a top 4 pick, I don't even have to worry about it whatsoever. Then if you get in the 5th through 12th spot, then we're like, oh God, now I got to really make a decision here that could really alter my whole season kind of deal. And it's like a little more stressful. But yeah. And I think that is a good segue to like Chase. Like, I don't know what to do with Chase, to be honest.
Exactly. And that is a perfect segue because a lot of these underdog drafts, these best ball drafts, he's almost the locked in number 5 at this point. It is a tricky decision because there's also the guys like Austin Eckler, maybe Dalvin Cook rebounding in this new system. There's some great workhorse running backs. If you're in half PPR, Derrick Henry, was on pace to smash the league last year. He had the most fantasy points per game, but we often see Jamar Chase going above them. I have a tier drop, and it's really chasing a tier by himself because I do think he warrants top 5 consideration for sure, right there at number 5. But I typically go running back. So ultimately, whereas I know I'm smashing Jefferson over Eckler, over Cook, I just don't always do that with Jamar Chase. Maybe in a PPR league, but even there, it's not like he's one of those just complete target hogs like the 2 guys at the top. So I do have them separated by a tier with Chase by himself. It looks like you guys have Chase in that top tier. Are you in agreement with the overall composite there?
I think,
and if so, why? If not, why not?
I think when we did it on the show, I believe what we ultimately decided on is Jefferson and Kupp in their own tier. And then I made the argument, and it sounds like you agree with me, that Jamar Chase is kind of his own tier because I don't see many people probably, and I wouldn't recommend taking like a CD Lamb or a Stephon Diggs over Jamar Chase. Like to me, Chase is clearly the next guy at the receiver position you want to take. There's this opportunity where he could potentially have more volume this year if they have a little bit more up-tempo, pass-happy style philosophy this year. Because last year, if you remember, they were one of the slower, run-heavier teams for the majority of the season.
31st in pace.
Because they're trying to protect Joe Burrow's ACL, which is a really good plan, by the way. Like it makes a lot of sense. But then you saw their pass rate and their pass like volume tick up as the year went on. I think that's where where Burrow is like most comfortable. He wants to spread the ball out, basically have empty backfields, pick apart a defense. Like that's just like where his bread and butter is. And so I could see the Bengals offense sort of evolving into something that's a little bit closer to that this year. And that could be a huge boon for Jason. You mentioned it with Justin Jefferson. Like Jefferson might just be the point blank best receiver in the NFL. Chase is the only other guy I'd probably throw in that conversation. Right. Like he might be even better. And he was certainly better on their college team. So I don't know, like there's just this potential here where Chase has, not only is he the best and like he's honestly one of the most unique receivers in the NFL. Yeah. He's like his body type and his style, it doesn't really feel like he should be this good, but he's just so ridiculously good. It's so explosive that he's just kind of a unique player. And so I think there's a chance that he has this explosion year where they have more volume and they have more tempo. And all of a sudden you're seeing him get, the type of target rate that you're seeing Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp get. And that is like sky is the limit there. So to me, he's in his own tier. I don't know if you can put him in the same tier as Kupp and Jefferson because of the volume concerns, but I think that there is a range of outcomes here where the volume really ticks up a lot. So that would be my argument. So I agree with you completely here that he's just kind of his own tier.
Absolutely. And if he does end up getting that volume, like you mentioned, he might be, if it's not Jefferson, it is probably Chase at the top. He did just break Jefferson's rookie receiving record. He's already talked about how he wants to follow up with having the most yards through 2 seasons. So he's gunning for Jefferson's sophomore season now as well, which is a terrifying thought. Plus, something that I think gets overlooked a little bit right now is how much better the Bengals line is going to be. I think that'll be a big part to why might be comfortable pushing the pace this year, but also Burrow was number 1 in clean pocket completion percentage at 76% last year. I mean, it is an astronomical. They were bottom 10 last year in PFF. They have top 5 upside with now adding La'el Collins and Alex Kappa and Ted Karras. I mean, these are some anchors at positions where they were grading out very low. They already had a solid left side. Now you really bolster the center and the right and left, the right tackle,
Yeah.
right guard. I mean, just think about the more time Burrow has to throw. Even if you look at the Super Bowl, like Chase might have won the Super Bowl for him. He's running wide open down there. So I really do think there's some serious upside that could be unlocked from the line as well, with a little more time and a cleaner pocket for Burrow.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's even, and now the more we talk about, I'm like, maybe I do need to bump him into that tier because the upside is the number one receiver for sure.
This
I don't
is
think
like the hard part
that.
about it is,
but the volume just does feel a little bit more locked in for those other guys as well. We'll move on now. So you mentioned some of those other guys in the next tier, and you can still see on the screen, we're pretty aligned with our next groups because, I have, me and you both have Chase in his own tier. It's a little bit different, but ultimately we're now looking at that kind of late first, early through mid second type receivers where it's Diggs, it's Adams or CeeDee Lamb. We're both kind of in lockstep here where we have Diggs at 4. Hold on, I'm pulling up make sure I have the most updated ones. Yeah, Diggs at 4, CeeDee Lamb 5, Adams 6, Deebo Samuel 7. And then the only real difference we have here, we both wrap up with Evans in this tier, but I actually don't have Tyreek in here. So
right.
You kind of know who I'm going to be fading. But is there anybody in this group that one you're really targeting, and then maybe one you're not so sure of in this kind of second round range?
I love CeeDee Lamb this year. I just for starters, like I've just always been a believer in his talent. To me, he's like one of the most he like Jamar Chase, he's kind of got a unique style. He's a unique player. He's kind of slender, tall, but he can run after the catch. He can go deep. He kind of can do it all, but he brings in like a little bit different body type than I think a lot of like quote unquote alpha type receivers would have. But I think he's a good route runner. He's going to get the opportunity again to get in to play inside, get those layup looks a little bit more often this year. He did that a bunch as a rookie, and he was really productive. And then they kind of moved him outside more often than not in his sophomore year. And so I'm really looking for them to kind of like make him the focal point of the passing game this year. And hopefully he can step up. And I think he can because I think he's that good. So again, this is a team that has been, I think over the last 3 years, top 10 in attempts, pass rate and tempo and things like that, like all the stuff that we look for in fantasy where they're going to be passing a lot and playing a lot of plays and scoring a lot of points. And the Cowboys have been that team over the last 3 years. And I don't expect that to change whatsoever. There's other variables involved, like the offensive line might not be quite as good, but again, the receivers in this group are so much worse than they were last year outside of CeeDee Lamb. So they just have, I think they're going to have to rely on him to be the go-to guy. So he's a guy that I'm willing to like, honestly, even take in the late first round. Like I'd almost rather take him than some of the other running backs in that area, just because I know he's going to give you these big spike weeks and he's going to have a high floor. And he's going to be in this high volume offense that I want a piece of that offense. And especially him, just because I think he's going to be the focal point.
Absolutely. Top 2 in passing yards in both of Kellen Moore and Dak's seasons together. Yeah. Top 5 in passing TDs in both of those. Number 1 in total yards and TDs last year. And now they're vacating 1,898 air yards, 205 targets, and a bunch of inside the 10, 16 inside the 10 looks. That's the 6th most in the NFL. Like there's just a ton of open vacancy on an attack that I still think will be very explosive. Maybe not quite at the level these last couple of years, but maybe he just takes it all on and is just a monster and shouldering it. I do have him above, as we mentioned, Devontae Adams, who he often goes right around. Adams usually goes ahead of him, to be honest. And so that means I'm kind of fading Adams in a sense. If I have the choice between them, I am going CeeDee Lamb. I'm a little bit worried now that he's going from no target competition in Aaron Rodgers to a little bit of a quarterback downgrade. Plus you got Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow, who you know is going to get peppered in the slot in the McDaniels scheme. So I go CeeDee Lamb over Adams. Am I crazy? Or are you in agreement there?
I'm with you. The Adams thing, I think, he's still an awesome player. He's still one of the best players in the NFL, but like, there's really only one way to go, and that's down compared to what he did last year. Like, he was the guy in that offense. Now they have, and in every high leverage situation, that was who Rodgers wanted to go to. That's who they went to in the red zone a lot. Now you have, like you mentioned, this is sort of just reiterating everything you said, but like, it is important to note, like, they have Waller, they've got Renfro. And obviously I don't think that Derek Carr is as good as the 2-time defending MVP of the NFL. So it just seems like, you can't draft a guy based on what happened last year. You have to kind of like project what they're going to do this year. And I think Adams is going to be really good, but I just don't see the high heights that he reached last year based on, the target competition and the quarterback downgrade. Potentially the offense downgrade overall. There's just a lot of variables there. McDaniel's coming in for this first season. We don't know exactly what to expect. So yeah, that I think it makes sense. And I've got CeeDee Lamb higher, and I feel pretty confident about that.
Yeah, and when we get to the tail end of the second round, then as I mentioned, one guy that's out of my tier, that's typically he's in yours and he's usually around there, but a guy I am nervous to have him lower than the consensus is Tyreek Hill. He's obviously so explosive. I mean, very few they can win you a week on their own type of upside as Tyreek Hill. And I don't know that will necessarily go away. I'm sure he'll still have some big gains, but I do think there'll be fewer and further in between. When you go from Pat Mahomes to Tua, you don't really need to spell that out, even though Tyreek's insisting that it's the most accurate deep ball he's ever played with. I mean, come on. I don't know what's going on there. But I think the bigger thing, too, is this is Mike McDaniels comes as the run game coordinator of the 49ers. I think they're going to be a run-heavier team than a lot of people are projecting. So you're going to a smaller pie than what Andy Reid was chefing up, to a quarterback downgrade for sure. And I also just really like Jalen Waddle. I think he's a great player. So to me, I think that the gap between Tyreek and Waddle is way too far in most ranking sets. So I have Tyreek actually a tier below alongside the Keenan Allens, the A.J. Browns we'll discuss in a minute. But man, am I too crazy? Is Tyreek that much talented that he's going to make me eat my words here?
I don't think you're crazy. I think those are very valid concerns. And I've waffled on him a lot, actually, over this offseason. And I think that the reason I have him continue to have him ranked pretty high, and I think I have both him and Waddle ranked pretty highly, is because I think the offense is going to funnel through those guys. Mm-hmm. You're correct in assuming, I think, that it's going to be a much lower volume passing game. But I think the way that the 49ers in general and Shanahan in general has been able to create explosive plays, scheme up ways for these guys to get into space and run after the catch and create these big plays. This has been a consistent thing. It's not like a flash in the pan. The Shanahan offenses are good at this. And so I think the two main beneficiaries of this, and for obvious reasons, is you want to get both Tyreek and Waddle in space with room to run and create explosive plays, kind of like we saw Deebo Samuel do last year. Deebo Samuel he was an absolute outlier in terms of what he was able to do in space last year. It was insane. But we have the same type of talent. Obviously, they're different players, but similar talent, explosiveness, and run after catch speed with Waddle and Tyreek, that I think you could see something special where it's they're scoring fantasy points way over expectation, kind of based on the volume. So that's, I guess, the counter argument that I would say. But I absolutely kind of get your concerns, and it could end up being much more slow paced. Their offense could be much worse than we're expecting, which is certainly in the range of outcomes. Tua could be terrible. I don't know what to do with Tua, honestly. Tua, I could make an argument to you that Tua is going to be one of the surprise quarterbacks in the NFL this year, just because we've seen the Shanahan style offenses. All the quarterbacks are 8 yards per attempt, no matter how much they suck, kind of deal. But I think it's also a really good fit for him in terms of style and the RPO game and work in the middle of the field and hitting a few deep shots and things like that. That fits his style. So I could see him break out. But of course, everything else we've seen from Tua in his career so far has been pretty not promising. So, there's a wide range of outcomes here. I'm betting on the bull case for this offense, because I think the scheme fits the talent and at quarterback and receiver. So that's kind of that would be my argument for them. But again, I totally understand sort of the concerns about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tua, if he does one thing well, he really does hit his receivers in stride quite well and let them just kind of keep going without any wasted motions. So it could be a perfect fit. And if Mike McDaniels, all the common traits to everyone he's acquired, whether it's Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert, the Tyreek Hill, and all these receivers, it's speed, speed, speed. So maybe his stamp on this Shanahan scheme is just pushing the pace. And if that's the case, I will definitely be wrong about Tyreek, Tua, and everybody. So I certainly, in these best ball drafts, I've had a couple builds where I do go all in on the Dolphins. I know it seems like I'm hedging here, but it's the truth. I am just nervous the running backs will be a little bit more involved. But it could be as a Pats fan, I'm very nervous for what that offense could be in our division. We already know the Bills are going to smoke us. Who knows if it's going to now be that as well. We'll now move on to that kind of round 3 range. I'm going to pull up now the next tiers, as you can see on screen here. So this is where we get a little bit different in our tier breaks, where you have a much bigger, and maybe this is one of the changes that will be coming, who knows, but you have 10 through 20 all in tier 3, whereas I kind of split that up to what I see more round 3 guys and then round 4 to 5 guys in there. So we'll chat through a few of those talking points. For yours, as you guys can see on the screen, tier 3, T. Higgins, Keenan Allen, A.J. Brown at 12, Williams 13, Pittman 14, Terry McLaurin 15, DJ Moore 16, Cortland Sutton 17, Brown 18, Marquise Brown, that is 19, DK Metcalf, and then Allen Robinson at 20. So I have a lot of the similar names, and I do feel like there is kind of a top of that tier where it's Keenan Allen, A.J. Brown. Sutton's kind of worked his way up there for me, at least. I'm really excited to see what he does with the Broncos. Pittman and Higgins are also kind of those round 3 common guys. And then there's a few names that aren't in that tier at all. In fact, there are a couple tiers later for me that I'll bring up in a second.
Yeah,
but
I'm excited.
Why don't we focus at the top, the cream of the crop of this tier at least? Is there one or two of those guys that you're really trying to hammer?
Yeah, so first off, I think now in the future update we'll have this tier is split into 2. There's like the first tier is reliable good. The second tier would be like chaotic good.
Nice.
Like there's a lot of like question marks about, for instance, DK Metcalf. We know that he's a talented player, but like this offense, who knows what the hell they're gonna do. So, but I would say like in general, the guys in this tier that I'm really excited about going after, first one that comes to mind is Mike Williams, just because I think his ceiling, we saw it last year, especially early on in the season, where he all of a sudden became like one of the best receivers in the NFL. He was, I believe, the wide receiver 1 in half PPR through 5 weeks. Absolutely just scorching hot streak like at the beginning there. And then he hurt his knee in week 5 and things were never really the same. And that, obviously this has been kind of like a recurring theme for his career.
Yeah.
And the big joke is like, he doesn't know how to fall down without hurting himself, but this is like the same argument you make with like all the running backs. It's like, do you want to have a safe guy, or do you want to chase upside and chase talent and chase situation? And I think with Mike Williams, he like checks a lot of boxes in terms of, I think he's talented. I think he's a big play creator. He can get down the field. He can go up and get it in the air. He's got the size and all that. He has and then of course he's catching passes from Justin Herbert, and they're in an offense that's really high volume, scores a lot of points. So he checks a lot of the boxes for me, and I think there's this chance that the torch is sort of passed from Keenan Allen to Mike Williams this year in terms of the de facto number 1 in this offense. And this is another offense that you just like want a piece of because they're going to pass a lot and they're going to score a lot of points. So long story short, to me, there's a world in which Mike Williams is like a top 3 receiver, and you can get him in the second round or whatever. And like he could be, I don't know if a league winner, but he's definitely going to be a guy that like can win you a lot of weeks, just because he has the explosion potential. If he can stay healthy, and some of these things, like some of these dominoes line up correctly for him, like he could really go off. So he's a guy that I'm definitely targeting in this area. And then, Pittman to me is like similar story. Like he's kind of flies under the radar, a little bit of a boring guy. Like people don't really know anything about this guy, I think, but big size. He's the clear cut number 1. I think this offense is going to have a massive, massive upgrade at quarterback. Like this is something that people are probably still underestimating, is like going from Wentz to Matt Ryan is monumental potentially for this offense. Even though I don't think Matt Ryan's like elite or anything, but like just having a consistent, accurate passer who can distribute the football to the playmakers, like that's going to be huge. That was not Wentz's game. He was just so chaotic every single game. So I like Pittman a lot. I think, he's probably appropriately priced. He could end up being a wide receiver, like a low-end wide receiver 1. It wouldn't surprise me. But to me, he's like the safe floor guy, and Williams is the high ceiling, scary, chaotic guy.
I love it. I love that call on Pittman. I love the call on both, just to emphasize the steadiness Matt Ryan could bring. Yes, it was Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, who might both be better players than Michael Pittman. But his last, since 2014, Matt Ryan's wide receiver 1, wide receiver 6, 163 targets, wide receiver 2, 203 targets, wide receiver 6, 129, wide receiver 7, 148, wide receiver 3, 170 targets, wide receiver 3, 156, wide receiver 5, 143. 2021 kind of scratch that off because Ridley, obviously, we know what happened there.
Right.
But man, that is a nice track record. And I don't know that the gap between Ridley and Pittman is all that big. All the reports are he's carving up this week the Lions secondary. I guess anybody can carve those guys up, so I guess I shouldn't go too much stock on that. But ultimately, it is still every week the guy's ready to make the jump. Yeah. He's the clear alpha. He's the number 1 here. I do like Alec Pierce. I do think they have some intriguing talents. I also just love the fact that they're going at a crazy fast pace. The last time Reich had a pretty solid quarterback Wade Rivers, it was pretty solid, but then you go back to, Andrew Luck, which is what Reich's kind of compared this to, say it's so nice to have a QB at that level. They were number 1 in pace, like number 2 in passing yards. They really pushed the pace. Yes, they've been slower these last few years, but I do think it's a big piece of just not trusting his quarterback.
They had to be. Ryan. Yeah, they saw this, I think, for real, is they had to be. They can't trust him to lead the game. They can't trust it to put the game on his shoulders. They basically had to mitigate Carson Wentz out of the game. They spent a first rounder on him, and then they traded him away immediately. If that doesn't tell you exactly how they feel about him, they didn't have a freaking backup plan at the time. The Matt Ryan thing came together because Deshaun Watson was potentially going to get traded to the Falcons, and Matt Ryan was like, all right, well, get rid of me because I'm not playing for you guys again. That was sort of just luck of the draw for the Colts. They traded away Carson Wentz with no backup plan.
Exactly.
If that's the most obvious, this is, to me, it's wow, this could be a massive, massive upgrade for them. Just because I'm very much low confidence in Carson Wentz.
100%, and deservedly so for that low confidence. And I'm with you too. I definitely want a piece of that Chargers passing pie. I think Herbert leads the league in passing this year. Yeah. It's his first, I was reading, it's his first real, actual NFL offseason where he's not dealing with COVID related things and what it just sounds
changing OCs. Didn't he had a different OC every year in college?
Every single year. Right. Yeah. Exactly. First year of some consistency. And it was damn good last year without the consistency. So I think this offense, they're already talking about how much more efficient they are. And they were crushing it last year. So I think this aerial pie is going to be huge. Whether you go the Williams route, I think the upside certainly is higher with him in terms of the top 3 ceiling. Or you go for the safety of Keenan Allen. 100 plus receptions in 4 of his last 5, 78 of 81 games. So that injury concern everyone was saying doesn't seem to be the thing. He's top 12 in 5 straight seasons in fantasy. He's kind of the guy I gravitate to. Maybe I'm boring, but ultimately
I still love Keenan too. Yeah.
Yeah. Either one of them though, and certainly, if one's going to be an alpha, we saw it with Williams those first 5 weeks, as you pointed out. They talked about using him as the Mike Thomas X all last offseason, and then it came to fruition for the start of the season. If that happens for the full year, he could just go crazy, and Allen could still have a solid season, but Williams would obviously be the one that changes your league. Those are 2 guys I love targeting. And in general, I actually just love this range of receivers. I also really like Courtland Sutton. I find myself, I know we were just kind of spent some good time on the round 2 guys, but I like the running backs a whole lot more there. And I feel like those drop off very dramatically. Maybe James Conner, I don't mind in round 3. Right. But Etienne also has a nice case as well. But still, from Kamara to those guys, I think it's a pretty steep drop off. So I really like the running backs in round 2. I don't think the drop off from receivers really that far from here. I think a lot of these guys we're talking about have very strong top 10 cases. One of them also being Courtland Sutton. We keep talking about quarterback upgrades, pace upgrades for with Pittman. If another guy could be this year's Cooper Kupp, I wouldn't be shocked if it's Sutton. All the latest reports are he's been the go-to for Russell Wilson. They're talking about Hackett. And I don't want to rub in your Seahawks stuff to you, but they do talk a lot about how Hackett is structuring this offense around those first 5 games of 2020. And I'm sure you remember those as a Seahawks fan.
Oh, yeah.
That was the one time we quoted.
Let him cook.
Cook, exactly. and that's what Hackett said. He zoomed on that film, and that's how he's making. He said, phew, we're going to let this ball fly here. And he wants Russell Wilson to dictate the pace. Over that span, Russell Wilson was on pace for 65 touchdowns. It was insane, over 5,000 yards. And so it might not be quite the same. I don't think Lockett, I think DK and Lockett are certainly better than Judy and Sutton, but I don't think it's a significant downgrade, especially if Sutton's the guy getting locked in on kind of a couple years now removed from that ACL injury.
Yep.
I could see him just absolutely blowing up in this range. So I really like these receivers. I also love Kyle Pitts. I know this isn't a tight end show, so it is tricky to figure out who you go. Auction-wise, this is kind of the round where I find myself you can get some of these guys for $20, $25. I just love plucking talent in this range because I don't think there's a big drop-off from the late round 2 to here, certainly at the receiver position at least.
Sutton's a tough one because to me, he's a very clear-cut potential top 12 receiver, maybe top 6 receiver or whatever in the NFL, just because he's going to have one of, if not the best quarterback upgrade of any team in the NFL, going from whatever it was last year with Teddy and Drew Lock to now Russell Wilson. I think I worry a little bit about expecting too much from Wilson because obviously when they let Russ cook or whatever, this was sort of the precursor to the NFL's move to a too high shell where they're starting to really confuse even guys like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. they're like in 2020. I'm trying to remember the years. I think in 2020, when Russ went absolutely bananas, that was like offset midway through the year. Teams started to catch up with what the Seahawks were doing, and then they started to like shut things down. He started turning the ball over at a really high rate, and then that point, Pete Carroll was like, "All right,
yeah,
we tried. We're turning that off. We're going back to my ball. We're doing it my way again." And this has been Pete Carroll's MO since he got back into the NFL. Is like he's like, this is how I'm going to do it, because I got fired after coaching the Patriots, blah blah blah, and then I went back to college and I formulated my philosophy and decided I'm just going to do everything my way and like F what anyone says, literally. And he traded away Russell Wilson, so he clearly lives this he lives this philosophy. But so I worry a little bit that looking back at that is I guess ignoring the fact that teams adjusted to the way that the Seahawks were playing and when they let Russ cook, quote unquote, let Russ cook. But that being said, like I think Russell Wilson with more volume is like it's got to be objectively good. Like I just like he's too good to like make it be bad. Like especially in fantasy, if you're worried about winning games, like you could argue till the cows come home that maybe teams should be more balanced. But in terms of fantasy, Russell Wilson can put up volume. He can put up touchdowns. He can create big plays, and he's going to funnel the passes now, especially with Tim Patrick out. I think he's going to funnel his passes to these two guys, Sutton and Judy. And so Sutton to me is more of the archetype of DK Metcalf, where you throw it up to him downfield, expect him to win, own the red line on the sideline, basically own that little like 2 or 3 yard area towards the sideline. And just Wilson can absolutely drop it in a bucket down there. And we've seen that a million times with both him and Lockett, both DK and Lockett, where he just puts it. There's times during the Seahawks, like last 10 years or whatever, where Russell Wilson drops back, and as soon as he starts to load up to throw it, I'm like, oh, that's a touchdown. Like you automatically just know it's going to be a touchdown. And so I'm really excited to see if we get some of that again, where he's just throwing it up and trusting his receivers to win. And I think these guys have the talent to do that. And there's like no one in the NFL who's more accurate downfield than Russell Wilson. Like he is pinpoint accurate. So I don't know for sure if they're going to be able to like do all the stuff they want to do with Russell Wilson, where it's like working the intermediate and short areas. That's not really been his game, the middle of the field. I think the jury's out on whether he can really be like super efficient in a high volume offense. But in fantasy, like it doesn't really matter, because I think he's going to put up points and he's going to put up yards, even if he has more turnovers than maybe people are expecting. I think it's going to be a boon for fantasy. So long story short, I like Sutton. It is a little concerning that he just wasn't very good last year.
Yeah.
But I think the ACL thing is so important to remember. Like that is such a huge variable. And the year after an ACL injury is usually where you see guys, especially young players, and he's still like 26 years old, especially young players come back and like really get back to their previous form. And his previous form in 2019 was over 1,000 yards. So,
right.
And that was with bad quarterbacks, I think. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Long story short, I know that I kind of long-winded on that one, but I do like Sutton. I think he's got immense potential. It's just a little scary hitting that button because it's been a while since we've seen him do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I fully get it. He did have, I saw a stat where like of all receivers who target at least 50 times, he was second in air yards per target at 15.4 yards. And I guess Russell Wilson saw some stat and said to Sutton himself, keep winning those long routes and see what happens. Like that was the quote.
Exactly. That's yeah.
So, as you mentioned, it could be dropped on. Plus you get the joy of like, there's nothing better on a Sunday red zone than when it cuts to now the Broncos, it will be, and you see Russell uncork it and you're just like, please be my guy on the other side of it, because you know it's going to be, as you said, a long bomb touchdown. When you see it's your guy, it's just like, yes, thank God. Here's like quick, like 17 points to my fantasy team. Love every second of it. So that's part of the joys of also drafting Courtland Sutton that I want to emphasize. But I know now you mentioned, too, you're going to be splitting up this tier. Although I will say a couple guys that aren't even in the next tier of like what you described as chaotic good. And that makes sense because these guys are chaotic good. You mentioned Metcalf. Like, all these guys I'm going to mention would be part of the chaotic good. So maybe it is a similar idea, similar tier to what we're picturing. But Marquise Brown, Metcalf, Moore, and McLaurin, I just have them a solid bit away from some of these guys. So is there any one or two of those guys, or if it's all four of them, please let me know as well. But are there any of those you think I should be reconsidering that you're definitely high on and you'd like to make a strong case for?
I think probably I'm probably way higher on Brown, right, than you are. I think that'll be the guy I'll single out, and I think there's a couple of this is another guy that's pretty high variance, and I recognize that. I think uh, he's a this is why he's in the chaotic good area. Like there's just a bit of chaos to his game. Like he's had drops during his career. He's had
Yeah.
opportunities to really come down with like these massive plays and it just bounces off his fingers. Like it's really frustrating sometimes to have him. But I think going from an offense that like really wasn't accentuating his skill set enough, I don't think in Baltimore, especially like because he could to me, he's like he can get a step on a corner. And if his quarterback trusts him and it can hit him in stride, like Lamar was um erratic, I think, as a deep passer during the last couple of seasons. And so, you got Kyler, who is like Russell Wilson, like one of the most pinpoint accurate downfield passers in the NFL. Like his completion rate, his accuracy rate downfield is outstanding. He is by definition a chaotic quarterback because he's more willing to like break the pocket. Like he doesn't like study the playbook, he doesn't study defenses. He's too busy playing video games or whatever. Like there's just so many there's such a wide range of outcomes here. But I think he's getting paired. Marquise Brown is getting paired back up with his college quarterback, who is one of the best deep ball passers in the NFL. He's going to an offense where he's going to be the number one guy at least for the first 6 weeks, and then even when Hopkins gets back. We saw like last year, Hopkins, they didn't really utilize him in a very creative way. They're just like lining him up on the left and saying, go run downfield. I think Marquise Brown is going to have a more varied route distribution. He's going to play in the slot a little bit, do a little bit of what Christian Kirk was doing last year with like slot fades. I don't know. I just think there's an opportunity here for Marquise Brown to get a lot of volume and finally have a guy. And I don't even think like Lamar is bad at like deep shots, but like, this is a match made in heaven because it's like instant chemistry from playing together in college. They put up huge numbers in college, and then just like the scheme fit for what he wants to do and, like go deep, win with the first couple steps of his route where he can just get off the line and get past the guy. Like, I think that gives him an opportunity to really shine. So I think he's going to have a strong target rate and hopefully he'll just be a little more consistent than he has been in Baltimore. I recognize I'm probably quite a bit ahead of ADP on him, but I don't know. I just kind of like, I think the situation finally kind of like right for him to like blow up.
It could be a perfect aligning of the stars and some stats to back that up. Murray was third in deep passer rating, third in yards per deep attempt at 15.8, finished first in deep percentage, completion percentage, and passing grade by PFF. So, I mean, this is definitely a huge upgrade, especially after Brown was he ranked 67th in target accuracy, 59th in catchable target rate, and 65th in quarterback rating per target.
I mean, I'm a Lamar like defender, but like, come on, this is like a night and day, like different types of quarterbacks. So do you just have these stats on demand? You just have like a list of amazing stats to like back up all my points? Because I appreciate this.
I have my draft guide pulled up, and I'm like, all right, who do I have written about it? So yeah, I kind of have a stat for everything, it seems at this point. But no, there's certainly I love the bull case for him. I guess the only reason I haven't been landing a ton of them is he goes in the same ranges of a couple of guys I love. I love Allen Robinson, for example, going to the Rams. I think you talk about a quarterback upgrade. Guy's best quarterback's been Blake Bortles, and he had a top 6 season when he had Blake Bortles. Yeah. So, I love Allen Robinson. I can't really pass him up for Marquise Brown. So I guess it's more of an opportunity cost. But I had that stat ready because I also see the case. I think it could be great. There are the things too, like is Kyler going to collapse midseason, and is he going to stay healthy, which he hasn't been able to do? Cliff Kingsbury collapses every year, it seems. What happens when Hopkins does come back? I do think the upside's very, very real, though, with Marquise Brown, especially if all of those boxes end up getting checked. He could be, he was the wide receiver 6, I think, in fantasy points per game to start the year last year. There was definitely some real upside to him, for sure. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I can't wait to see when you guys do upgrade those or update the tiers, not upgrade, but update and see where they break.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have to powwow because these things kind of move as you get more information and things like that. We'll powwow and get them all together. But I think they're probably going to be ending up a little bit closer to where you've got things. I think just like the milk is rising, or like the cream is rising to the top a little bit with some of these guys. And I think we need to like hone in on some of these. But yeah, it is always such a process and it changes like weekly. So I
got to ask in a wide receiver show, and this is another guy I can't pass up for Marquise Brown is Gabriel Davis. And it's such the most polarizing player. I saw again, he's trending on fantasy Twitter today. Like you can't wake
every
up
week. Yeah.
It's every single time. But I'd love to know where your stance is on, because I'll just start off and say I am all in. I have him a couple tiers above where you guys have him right now. I think you have him at 26, 27 overall. I have him at 16, so a nice 10 spot inside my top 20. I just love the upside. As polarizing as he is, last time we saw him, 204 and 4 TDs. Yes, one game. You got to judge on more than that. But once he took over for Sanders, and I don't have the answer for why it took him so long, other than Sanders was doing solid. He's a trusted veteran. It was one of those things. Sanders never really gave them a reason to take him off, even if Gabe was better. And once Gabe was in, he was better. So 1.93 yards per route run, 22% target rate when he was in, 80 PFF grade, like some really nice predictive stats that this guy was already kind of taking the leap. And now it's just clear to me he's going to be the number 2. Every report, 90% plus snaps, like maybe even more snaps than Diggs, because he's the better run blocker is what I was reading. All the latest camp reports, in 11 on 11, he was unguardable, put on a show, like 3 touchdowns from Josh Allen to start it. So I just think this is a guy that's ready to take that next leap. Plus, anytime a player goes from 210 to 227 of all muscle, and he doesn't lose his speed, which it sounds like he didn't. I mean, the guy just sounds like he's an absolute beast right now. So I've kind of gone on the loony bin with Gabe Davis, but I'm going all in. And I know there's certain reasons not to, but I'm all the way in on him. I'm too deep at this point. But what are your thoughts on Gabe Davis?
I'm with you. I think
nice.
Just based on this offense, the volume at which they throw, the tempo at which they play, the points that they're going to score, the quarterback they have under center, like a perfect fit for a guy like Gabe Dave, who's just going to go win down the sideline. It's almost the exact same conversation we were having about like Sutton and like a DK Metcalf style player, where like you can just trust him to win downfield. You can throw it up to him, and he's shown that he's done that. He did that as a rookie too, like playing like a part-time role. He had, I don't know off the top of my head, like 6 or 7 touchdowns, even though he was only playing like 30% of the snaps. And so I think, like you said, the development has been gradual and steady, and now it feels like he's really ready to come into his own. I mean, this is a common thing for a 4th round picks. Like, it's funny because like if a early round guy, like a 1st or 2nd rounder, doesn't do anything his rookie year, we basically write him off. But if you look at sort of the history of it, like later round guys tend to like take a little bit longer to climb the depth chart, climb the ladder. Teams aren't as like don't feel as much pressure to play them early on in their career. And like the way that the Bills are built, not to like give excuses for why he wasn't playing last year, but like they were ready to win like a Super Bowl. Like they didn't need to like play their young guys, So it sounded like he kind of like developed as the year went on, got better, started being more consistent. And then as the year went on, they're like, okay, he's ready to go. And he emerged as a big time player. We saw it in the playoffs. He had 4 touchdowns and 200 yards receiving in the freaking playoffs. Yeah. So obviously he's not going to do that in every game, but I think honestly, just playing 90 plus whatever it is, 85, 90% of the snaps, like he's just by osmosis going to be like a wide receiver too. Like this is like, unless they absolutely ignore him for whatever reason, and Josh Allen just feeds Steph Diggs, which I guess it's in the range of outcomes, but I think less probable. He's going to be a wide receiver too. You can get him in like the wide receiver 30 range, 32. I think last time I checked, he was like wide receiver 30 from Fantasy Pros. And so he's already a value. And then if he's like better than we thought in an offense that is already, we know is going to be really good, like then he could be really a huge like value for your team, be like a wide receiver 2 for you, like a high end wide receiver 2. And so I love it. I think he's got a solid floor and an even higher ceiling.
Absolutely. And we'll wrap up our conversation. He's in your kind of tier 4. Let me pull up the next kind of group here on this. This is like the round 5 to 6 or so, maybe even 7 in this range of receivers here, where you have tier 4. It goes from 20 through 35, kind of big tier, 15 guys here. I have it broken up a little bit more, which again might be the case with you guys, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it will.
Update it a bit. Yeah. So as you see, some of the guys we already talked about, big differences for me: Marquise Brown, DJ Moore, more in this range for me. Whereas Gabe Davis, some of the names that you highlight, Deontay Johnson, another one out there for you. But this is kind of the that round 5-6 range. Is there anybody in that range that you are definitely going at? It's kind of the same conversation as we keep moving through this, but is there any round 5-6 receivers you find yourself kind of targeting more often than others?
I think part of the reason we had such a big tier here is like we like all these guys. Like they're you know what I mean? It's like you could make an argument for really any of these guys as being someone we're targeting. Like the guy that I keep looking at when I'm just looking at this list is Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I love it.
Who I mean, not to like oversell. I don't want to oversell him because like I think that, you know, it's still the Lions. They're still not going to have like an elite quarterback under center, blah, blah, blah. But he's playing essentially what is like a Cooper Kupp style role where he's getting layup targets over the middle of the field. He's shown an ability to really get open at like will. And he has the run after the catch ability. He's a tough son of a bitch. He can catch the ball in traffic, like everything you want from like a high volume receiver. So I think, and honestly, maybe I'm going to end up regretting this, but like I'm kind of bullish on the Lions offense this year, like not being like explosive and awesome. And I don't think Jared Goff's going to be like the second coming or whatever, but I think they have a really good offensive line. I think they've got a good run game, and now their receivers are really good. I think Chark is super underrated. You know, I think he's going to be a good role player for them. I don't think necessarily like super high volume guy, but like he'll stretch the field, open things up in the middle. And then, you know, once Jameson Williams gets back, which I don't know if that will even really be a big factor this year, but like maybe down the stretch, he'll change things up too. But I think Amon-Ra is just going to be sort of a underneath security blanket for Goff. And, you know, again, just kind of hoover up some of the targets over the middle of the field and just do a lot with it. So he's a guy that I want to have on teams. I'm a believer in his talent. I'm a believer in the way that they're using him. And I think this is probably like the cheapest you're ever going to be able to get him now.
I'm in 100% agreement. I think he's going to be going in round 2 as of next year.
Yeah.
23 points in 5 of his last 6 games, playing with Tim.
Random dudes don't do that. Like, he's good. Yeah.
No, exactly. It's actually Scott Barrett had an awesome tweet about like the list of people who have done that.
Yeah.
So averaged at least 17.5 fantasy points per game over their last 6 weeks of their rookie season. And certainly 25 plus, which is what he was averaging, actually the most of anybody in the fantasy playoffs, even more than Cooper Kupp, which is insane. But the rookies who have done that, number 1 on the list of fantasy points per game was 32 is Odell Beckham. Number 2 is Randy Moss. Number 3 is Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Jeez.
4 AJ Brown, 5 Michael Thomas, like Waddle, Chase, Jefferson, all also on this list.
Good list.
And he's ahead of those guys. I mean, it's just elite company. I'm not saying St. Brown is better than Chase or Jefferson, but you just look at the list of people who did that. You have to be special to pull this off. And certainly if Tim fucking Boyle's your quarterback, like it's just, I don't get how people don't buy this talent. They're all saying it's a product of everyone being hurt. And 33% target share. Is that going to happen this year? No, it's not. You got DJ Chark, you mentioned, but those guys, I think, honestly, having a Chark and a Jameson, is that really going to be a bad thing when they're creating space for him to do what he does best? Like,
I
Goff
totally
and him, the synergy, like it's the same. It's what Goff used to do with Kupp. It's just layup. Like that's the type of receiver, the type of quarterback. So he is the guy that absolutely stands up. I have him. I every time I talk about him, I want to move him up. I think I have him at 19 already, 20 right here in the rankings. But I look at like Waddle and Johnson, and I like that I can get him a lot later. I can get him a whole round later than those guys. I mean, I've been just hammering him in round 5.
My personal ranks, I have him at wide receiver 20.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, so we're perfectly aligned. Both at 20 right there. So yeah, perfect round 5, 6 guy. Make sure you're hammering Amon-Ra St. Brown. I know we're up against it. I know at the top of the hour you got to get out of here, but I did want to just highlight like the couple names, and this might be part of the update because we've gotten some updates on Godwin's health and things of that nature. There are a few guys outside of the Ringers top 35 that might, I don't know who you've reconsidered or not here. A few of those names, like Ayuk was right on the fringe. Chris Godwin was 37. Juju was 38. Are any of those guys cracking your top 35 now? And if so, is there any like one of those guys that you're really highlighting?
Godwin is going to go up. I think we are still being pretty conservative with the injury situation, not really knowing exactly how quickly he was going to be returning. I think there's a lot of positive signs that it'll be like early in the season. So maybe he misses 1 or 2 games and then gets right back in there. So he's a guy that I've definitely moved up in the last week, and we update this weekly. So he would be probably the first one I circle. I still like Ayuk. I love, but I just kind of worry about the volume in that passing game. Like if he's all of a sudden the number 1 in this offense, then you have to make the assumption that like either Debo or Kittle are going to fall down quite a bit more than you really expect. And so I don't know, I'm a little bit like leery about that one, but yeah, I'd say Godwin is the main guy in this group here. That's going to be way higher, I think, in the update that we do next week.
Awesome. Yeah, I would agree with that. The wide receiver 6 last year. So
Yeah. Yeah.
he totally fits Brady's style. Assuming Brady comes back, who knows what's going on
God,
here?
I know.
Whether it's
Seriously.
the mass singer or not, who knows? Have you seen that whole Reddit thread? It's
Yeah.
amazing
Yeah.
if you haven't. But yeah, who knows what's going on there? Yeah, Godwin, though, absolutely. He's one of the few guys that,
Yeah.
I mean, coming off the ACL, I would love to buy back into. Awesome. Well, Danny, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I know you got to get running at the top of the hour. Why don't you give our
Sure.
listeners one more reminder of where they can find your work and anything else you'd like to promote?
You can find our rankings at fantasyfootball.theringer.com. And as I mentioned, we're going to be updating it here over the weekend. It'll probably be live by Tuesday at the latest. And then follow us at the Ringer Fantasy Football Show. We do 3 episodes a week during the off season, 4 during the season. Yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, it was a blast talking receivers with you today. Best of luck in your 2022 leagues. And thanks again. Really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, man.
Cheers. See you, Danny.
See ya.
All righty, Wolfpack. Well, thanks again for an awesome show here. We'll now hit all those questions that you guys have coming in the mailbag. But thanks again to Danny Kelly for an awesome stream. He's the absolute man. Great receiver takes. Go again, check out those receiver rankings at fantasyfootball.theringer.com. One of the best draft kits out there. So if you guys have some questions, get them on. It doesn't look like we have too many out here. Somebody shout out, I wish Danny was still here. That's what Danny looks like. What a cutie. I love that. That's the only question we got. So if anybody else has any questions here, let me know. I'll start doing the kind of shameless self-promotion in a sec. But no, here they come. Chris Thomason. How do you feel about ETN now that Robinson's back? I actually like that Robinson's back because I think it's going to cause his ADP ETN to dip. I have not been drafting ETN at his price. He's going kind of around a lot of those receivers. If you were here earlier, Chris Thomason, that, you know, whether it's Pittman, whether it's Sutton, some of those round 3 guys that we both really like to blow up and take off. That's where he's going right now. And I'd rather go with those receivers at that range. I typically have running back, and then start hammering these receivers. So if he starts to fall to round 4 now, I'll feel a lot better about taking him. And that's where we're starting to see the ADP dip. I think Robinson's obviously a little bit of a concern. He could get the goal line work, short yards, maybe even more carries than Etienne. But the track record of guys coming back from Achilles is non-existent at the running back position. I'm worried about Akers because of it, and I'm certainly worried about Robinson, who did it a lot later than him. The guy is an absolute monster in terms of like a worker, and the way he's kind of risen up through the offseason. You know, he's got that kind of fight in him, the stupid expression, but he's got the dog. Like, that is James Robinson. So if anybody's going to come back and be all right, it could be him. We know that Doug Peterson loves his committees. Etienne, this doesn't change my thoughts on Etienne, though, because I always kind of thought there'd be another guy there, another person taking the power back role, whether it was Robinson or not. So now it's just a matter of how far does Etienne's price dip, because I wasn't really drafting him at all. If he falls enough to like round 4, maybe even round 5, where he started the offseason, then I'll go right back into it because a great pass catching profile. He scores points the ways you want, explosive plays and passing. So it doesn't change my thought of him whatsoever, other than I think the price is going to change, and now I might be back onto him when I have not been drafting him. Jason, great question. Michael Pittman or T. Higgins? I definitely go Pittman here. And to me, it's just a matter of the number 1 versus the number 2 on a team. And yes, number 2s, we've seen multiple teams have 2 top 12 receivers. JJ Zachariason did a great study on it. It is easy to picture a world where T. Higgins finishes in the top 12, maybe even the top 10 as a player, one of the best receivers in the league. It's just a matter of he has maybe the best receiver in the league ahead of him. And it did seem like towards the tail end, I wish I had exact target rates right in front of me, but by the playoffs especially, it did seem like Jamar Chase was kind of climbing as like the clear alpha. I'm the 1, you're the 2, rather than a 1A, 1B situation. I do think there's plenty of, as we talked about with Danny, if they pick up the pace, maybe there's more volume for both of these guys to finish the top 10. If they, the line is protecting them and they're getting more and more deep shots, which they already were insane at. There's definitely a great case for Higgins, and certainly as a player, I do really like him, but he was a bit more inconsistent than a lot of people want to recognize. Fewer top 12 or top 24 weeks than Brandon Cooks, who goes like 2 rounds later as a clear alpha, clear number 1. I'm not saying I'd rather have Cooks than Higgins, but the inconsistency was pretty tricky with Higgins last year. Whereas Pittman, I think, is just going to be the steady, clear alpha all year, a guy that's going to probably see 9 to 10 targets almost every single week. It's how Ryan does it with his with his wide receiver 1s. Yeah, Julio, Ridley, they demand targets, but I think Pittman is right close to at least Ridley's level, who was the wide receiver 5 win his one season with Matt Ryan for a full season. I think that's within Pittman's range of outcomes. All the reports are he is just carving up defenses, whether it's his own defense, whether it's the Lions this week. Pittman's an alpha, and he's got a receiver who loves, a quarterback who loves to pepper alphas. So I'm going Pittman there by a decent margin. While acknowledging how much I love T. Higgins, it's definitely Pittman for me, Jason. Rate my team for Chris Thomason. Hurts, Eckler, Fournette, Debo, Amon-Ra, Waller, Etienne. That is a phenomenal team. Chris, I don't know how many teams that is, but that is stacked. Eckler, Fournette, 2 top 12 running backs. Debo, I'm a little lower on Debo actually this year, but still, you could got him and Fournette, whichever one fell around 3, great value there. I love Amon, as we talked about. Waller, I'm a little bit skeptical of. Etienne, also, as I mentioned, a little skeptical of. But when you got that much security at the top, and again, you have Amon-Ra, one of my favorite players, it's a good squad. I'd like to see what the other teams are in there if it's a 10-teamer, there's probably it's 12-team. Even better. As you say, I love Hurts too. I think Hurts, my quarterback 3 in my ranking. So you got a lot of guys I really do love, Chris. So yeah. And by the way, anybody watching on Twitter, I know a lot of your viewers do come from Twitter. I can't see questions if you're asking them. I apologize. It doesn't pop up on the StreamYard platform we use anymore. So if you're on Twitter and you're asking questions, I apologize in advance. Come on over to YouTube and I'll be sure to answer your question. 12-team PPR. Yeah, they're just telling us the scoring settings there. Jason, are you concerned about Godwin coming back from ACL? Yes and no. I think they're going to take it along very slowly. He's their franchise player. They've been taking it slow with him. So the fact that he's already practicing in 7-on-7s, working his way back, they're not going to rush it. So when he's ready, he'll be out there. They signed Julio, so they don't have to rush it. So whenever he's back, even if that means he misses a first couple of weeks, I expect it to be pretty close to just Godwin right from the start because they're not going to force it. Even if that means your 5 weeks it takes. That would suck, and at his price, he's not worth it if he misses 5 weeks. But to me, it seems like they're projecting a late September, misses 1 through 3 weeks. Then you get the wide receiver 6 of last year that they've really taken their time with. They know he's fully healthy. I like Godwin a lot, especially that he's going late 5th, early 6th right now. I think Godwin's a great player. So ACLs have kind of become just a non-issue for most players, and it packs different positions differently. But receivers have typically seemed to recover fast from ACL tears, and Godwin's just one of the hardest workers out there. So I'm not too worried about Godwin coming back from that ACL. I guess the only real concern with him is he goes at the same range as Amon-Ra St. Brown. And as you guys heard, we're both very, very high on Amon to be a just absolute steal in that 5th round range. So I like Godwin a lot, and especially when he falls to the 6th, all day, going to hammer that. Yeah, 2-spot, good team there for sure. Eckler too, I don't mind that at all. I actually have him at that 3-4 range. I have him ahead of McCaffrey myself. So that's probably what you're getting at. Chris, are you an idiot to take him over McCaffrey? I don't think so. If McCaffrey plays 16 games, then yes, you are. But I've had McCaffrey 2 years in a row. I'm not going back to the well unless he falls to 5. If he plays all the games, he's going to be the best player in fantasy, probably by 100 points too. So that's the risk of passing on McCaffrey, but I can't stomach the risk anymore. I can't. I'd rather absorb that risk of passing on him than the risk, of owning him and him playing 11, missing 11 games, as it's always been the case. He's played 6 combined games the last 2 years. So I don't think that's a bad pick. I personally, especially you said PPR, I probably would have looked to Kupp or Jefferson ahead of Eckler, but I can't fault you either. I really like Eckler. He's my lock in my top 5 for sure. So if you wanted running back and Taylor was gone, I don't blame you at all for that. I think that's a solid pick, even though I probably would have gone Kupp or Jefferson myself and see what falls back. If, Kamara there or something in round 2, see what happens. All righty, folks. Well, that seems to be it. Thank you, Chris and Jason. Awesome comments and questions this whole time. Of course, if you're catching the replay here, you want to comment in. I'll answer any questions on the video that are posted throughout the day and whenever they come up. You can also find me at RotoStreetWolf for any questions as well. My rankings updated daily at rotostreetjournal.com/bigboard. But rotostreetjournal.com is the homepage where we breed and feed fantasy wolves. Tons of great articles, whether it's best ball, dynasty, DFS, or just redraft. That's all you're looking for. We're capturing the news with our stock watches, all the good stuff. So find all that content. You prefer podcasts as well. The Fantasy Full Bag Dive is where we pave your path to 2022 titles in the audio format. All right, guys. I'm the Wolf. Thank you so much again for being here. On your way out, if you haven't already, please consider hitting that thumbs up, subbing to the channel. We have some more great guests lined up. Graham Barfield next week, Pat Fitzmaurice, Pete Over. We just loaded with good guests for the rest of the summer until I'm back in school, and we'll have our own streams in the fall. But man, we got some great stuff coming. The guide is launching this weekend. Got to go finish that up the rest of today. But if you enjoy this content, please like, please sub. Hit me up at RotoStreetWolf on Twitter. Thanks again, WStream. I appreciate that, Jason W. fan, being here and interacting as well as you are. Awesome, guys. Best of luck. If you have any drafts this weekend, show me how they go. The Wolf of the Fancy Sheep, be the Wolf guys.